Hey guys, welcome back to another Weird Wednesday. I'm Ashers, and this is
Pato.
And also
Karac St. Laurent.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have Karac on. Probably a lot of you guys already are kind of familiar with Karac. I know Karac and I have kind of we've kind of, I'm not going to say held hands a little bit, but we've definitely crossed paths some. So it's just been, I mean, it should have happened sooner. But I'm excited. Yeah, we're going to do the guest thing again this week, guys. Last month we pretty much did, last month was drug month, right? I mean, we talked all about the drugs all month, and this month we're kind of gonna do something a little bit different. I usually hate putting out, our secrets and what we're gonna do, but May is about monsters, so you're going to get a lot of cryptozoology, a lot of fun stuff. We got a lot of fun people coming up, and Karac gets to be the special guest and kicking it off, so it's gonna be amazing. But Pat, how was your weekend?
It was all right.
Very straightforward. Yeah. I respect that.
I mean, just, as you remember from last episode, my kid had COVID. So just dealing with that. I mean, it was all right. He wasn't, he was pretty healthy. So
he's alive still.
Yeah. So it was just a lot of playing Pokemon Snap. And actually working on dinosaur erotica. I don't know if you caught that on Facebook or on Twitter. Wednesday? Yeah. So I mean, I don't want to talk too much before it happens, but putting together a potential radio drama with some other podcasters in the vein of Chuck Tingle-esque dinosaur erotica. So I'm stay tuned for that.
I'm not sure what the reply is for that. Yeah.
I have a bloody disgusting thing dropping tomorrow. So
good, great. Well, that by the time they hear this episode, then it'll be out. So you can send the link. We'll put the link in the description.
You're not fooling me with that shit. I've heard tell that you're going to include me in the show notes, and
you never send me the links. That's
still waiting.
Don't you tell people that this is my fault? What are you talking about?
Fool me once, shame on me. But
you're the one that annihilated your medium when you had your paranoia episode.
What's the point of doing a cryptozoological fucking conspiracy podcast if I can't get high and get incredibly paranoid sometimes?
You can. I'm not blaming you for it. I'm just saying while you went through it was there up until you freaked out. So hey, I'll put it back. Right. Dinosaur erotica. I'm kind of like, I'm half excited for this because I think it sounds like a lot of, I'm assuming you're going to ask me to be involved, and I feel like I don't really have a choice but to say yes.
Plowed by a Pachyosaurus.
This is welcome to the show, Karac.
Thank you. What an introduction it's been.
Wednesdays are weird.
It certainly has been so far.
But no, I'm kind of excited about it. I did see some of the other people are really into this. Like a lot of people were like, yes, you need to do this. Like they were all for the dinosaur erotica. So we will keep this saga wide open on what's happening. I know Pat sent me a little excerpt today. I haven't had the chance to read it yet. I'm like, I need to get into a headspace. I at least need to smoke a joint and then grab a beer. Who
would have guessed there was an audience so clamoring for that?
Are you kidding me? It's huge on Amazon.
Yeah, it really is.
Seriously? It's enormous. Oh my god, yeah. Oh my god,
really? Yeah. Wow.
Look up Chuck Tingle. He's one of the more prolific writers in the no, seriously, it's one of those things where people self-publish 99-cent ebooks and they're just short stories about a cheerleader that gets screwed by a raptor in a fucking high school gym locker. It doesn't make sense. There's not a whole it plays very loose with space-time, but it's a huge medium, and then people are super into it. And what's even the stories themselves are kind of but the Photoshop cover art that they put together for these things are even better. And there was this weird picture that I came across my Twitter feed, and it's like a chicken a bikini making out with a pachyosaur while a gray alien watches. And I was like, oh,
what does a pachyosaur look like? Hang on.
Have you ever seen Fallen Kingdom? It's like the dinosaurs with the dome heads. The head butters.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Yeah, I don't know. It kind of started as a joke on Twitter, and then people like, I don't need much provocation for this stuff. So like, people were like,
10 people were like, "Oh yes, do this, please."
And that's literally all it took. And then I sat down and I wrote the first episode.
Wow.
So, and then we were talking about doing it as a radio play, which is cool because we had I'm playing with space-time continuum here, but we had Hank on not too long ago, and he was talking about Welcome to Night Vale, which I used to be like a really big fan of. And just the radio play in general, like there's so many people doing podcasts now. I feel like there's not an appropriate amount of people creating radio dramas, which you think there should be, there should be at least some space where people are doing this. So, and I know it's kind of how lore started out, but like, I just thought like, okay, instead of just like writing this thing, like, yeah, we got a bunch of podcasters here and, we could do the whole postal service thing and just mail files back and forth.
Right. There's this cryptozoology. I guess it's technically a radio drama. I might be wrong on that, but it's on the YouTube channel Swamp Dweller, and it's called Letters from a Cryptid Hunter. And it is. I saw a bit of it, and it's really freaking cool. So I definitely recommend checking that out at some point.
That does sound really cool. It is. Big Dill does. Big Dill has. It's not really a radio drama. It's more of a video that's kind of poorly animated, but it's called Cryptid Wars Storytime. That he used to tell it. He used to I think he just made it up on the fly. I don't know if he wrote it beforehand or just made it up, and he would tell it during his live streams. But now it's turned into like this big thing, and he's gotten an animator, and they're going to redo it, and they're going to have a part 2, and it's going to be like a big. But it's going to be. It's ridiculous because I don't know if you're familiar with Big Dill at all, but some of the listeners here are, because I'm a Big Dill person. But he's kind of just goofy. He's kind of like a young Peter Kane. He really is.
Peter Kane, what a rabbit hole Peter Kane is.
We can talk about Peter Kane in a bit. I like the guy. I'll say that first and foremost. I like Peter Kane. It's just that you have to be in on the joke or you're not going to get it.
He's really satire, and it's so hilarious. It's like,
and people fall for it all the time, and it's just like, are you guys? They're like, oh, that's so fake, and it's like, yeah, guys, it's supposed to be.
That's the joke. Is that it's such a realistic reaction to a completely fake thing.
So, but yeah, they do that too. No, I'm excited about the dino erotica, as weird as it sounds. I think it'll be fun. I think it'll be exciting. So we'll keep everybody posted. I'm going to read it and I'll let everybody know what I think, without, of course, giving anything away. But that'll be great.
Yeah, spoiler alert, they come at the end.
Do they? Both of them? Wow.
No, actually, the dinos, yeah, they both do.
Yeah. You know what you should do, speaking of radio dramas?
I had to think about it for a second. I'm the one that wrote it.
Speaking of radio dramas, you should pull a War of the Worlds and read it as though it's actually happening and try to fool people.
Really good idea. That's
a news headline.
The last podcast I did, we used to do radio dramas every once in a while. We did War of the Worlds for April Fool's Day. We did 12 Angry Men.
That's a good one.
We did I guess NPR had turned the first 3 Star Wars movies into radio dramas.
No way.
In the early 80s, yeah, and they published the screenplays, and we did that with sound effects at a big cast.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, which is too much work. I would never do all that shit again. But a 4-character dino erotica drama, I would most certainly get my hands dirty with. So.
I'm excited about it. Well, did you do anything else besides write about dinosaurs having sex with women, or?
I mean, how do you top that?
You can't.
Good question. How much further do you go than that?
Yeah, I don't know if I want. Oh, you know what? We didn't talk about last week. So I subscribed to Shudder, so that because I finally wanted to get in on the whole
the Twitter thing.
Yeah. And this week the first week was absolutely abhorrent. I had like a terrible time. It was I did not like that audition movie. And then Class of 1984 I'd seen already. So I was just kind of like, whatever.
It was good. And by the time you hit the second movie, it's late. So unless it's something you're really into, it's hard to stick around.
Right. But this week I had a much better time. And I only made it through the first movie. I didn't even see what the second one was. Because they had that extended thing where he was talking about hand dryers. And I'm like, and I'm out. But
you didn't like the hand dryer graphic?
I just went to bed. I was like
an air blower. You didn't like that?
But it's neat because it's such a Twitter phenomenon, or maybe it just is with the people that I follow on Twitter. Maybe there's large swaths of Twitter where they have no fucking clue what Joe has 5 minutes.
It trends in the top 5 across the whole website on Friday night. So it does well. It's always kind of a war to try to get it to number 1. But you got a hashtag. You got to use the hashtag to really get the interaction. You know, you reach so many people. So you got to do it right, Pat. I'll teach you how to hashtag.
That's why I need like a social media intern to just kind of sit next to me on the couch and I can say shit to, and then they can post it or not.
It does get tedious. Well, I mean, I'm obligated to do it nowadays. So I do it. I mean, I'm really on top of it, you know, as far as the tweets go and interacting and all that. You know, it's kind of like a job, but you know, before, I understand it does get difficult sometimes, but
well, especially with Audition, because I hadn't seen that, and I had to, you know, there's subtitles and shit, so you actually have to watch the movie. You can't really play on your phone the whole time, otherwise you're gonna miss what's going on.
I have noise happening outside my window, so I apologize if you guys hear that. But yeah, no, but it's just like, you know, it's so involved. There's so many people that do it, that it is like you're watching a movie with all these people. It's really great. You know, it's like an interactive theater.
I definitely get the appeal to it. Yeah.
Kirk, do you know about do you do the Last Drive-In, Joe Bob Briggs? Are you a horror movie fan?
I'm a horror movie fan, but I don't know this particular subject.
Oh, interesting. It's just basically, I mean, I guess for anybody that doesn't know in the audience and Karac, Joe Bob Briggs is a horror host, and he's been around. He did Monster Vision back when it was on TNT, and he's a film critic, and he's just a really big icon in the horror community. So Shudder, the horror streaming service, has picked him up to do a show called The Last Drive-In. And during their season, it's on every Friday night. They show 2 movies, and then while you're watching these 2 movies, you kind of got to be a Twitter person too. Everybody on Twitter is like tweeting about and talking about these movies together, and it's just really interactive. It's a lot of fun. Like I said, you meet a lot of people that way.
That's so cool.
It is. It's nice. Yeah, it's nice. I mean, everybody can just kind of come together, and you know, got shit to do on a Friday night. You can sit at home and watch Shudder and talk to people on Twitter. So
I completely refused to participate for the first 2 seasons, and then this one, I was like, okay, I'll get involved.
And you're starting to enjoy it now, is what you're saying. You're enjoying it more than you did initially.
We'll see what they screen next week. That's the other thing I don't like too, is that you don't know the movies until, I guess that way they get you sitting there already.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. But, I understand that. Well, that's interesting.
But that's all I got. What about you, Ashers? How was your weekend?
Oh, yes, about my weekend. It was, I mean, I went to a bonfire. I had, you know, I hung out with some friends. I mean, Friday night I did the Shudder thing, and then Saturday I went out, and it wasn't, you know, anything too exciting. It was just kind of chill. We drank. I've been trying to find little beers forever, and not like find little beers, but like make little beers because you have to. But I couldn't find the fucking Liquor 43, and I had to go, even like Saturday night, we had to go to like 3 different stores to find it. And but I did. I got my little beers, and it's been like kind of a thing, and we just kind of hung out. No big deal. And then Sunday I went out. I was like shopping, so I just bought a I was reminiscing with somebody about video games, and I was talking about my first video game that I remember playing was Killer Instinct for the Super Nintendo. So I had a weird childhood. I was like 3. But that was the first game I could remember playing. So I got online and I bought a copy of it. Well, the problem was I don't have a Super Nintendo. And so I had to buy, I'm like, okay, let me buy a Super Nintendo. So I was like looking at them, and they're about $75 a piece. But then I came across clone consoles, in which case you can play not just Super Nintendo games, you can play Nintendo games on them and Sega games and all this and that and the other. So I ended up getting a clone console instead. So now, and I got one that was like the 2-in-1. So I've got the NES and the SNES because I already have Sega. So I had to, so I bought a game, and then I had to buy a whole console to go with it. And so I was like, well, you know, I'm going to go out shopping, and I'm going to go, you know, buy some video games and whatnot, and buy some books. There's a local used bookstore that I like to go to, and I get all my weird ass books from. And I got a couple, but I did not buy any video games, sadly. And that was really it. I mean, it was really nothing exciting, but the thing about it is that usually I work all the time. So this was much needed for me to just kind of like not be obligated to do anything. I remember like the bonfire, like we were sitting there, we smoked a joint, I got really high. And I remember like sitting there on the couch, and I kind of started to freak out a little bit. I'm like, oh my God, I can't be this high. I've got an obligation of some sort. And then I like audibly like kind of, breathed out and was like, oh my God, I don't have to do shit. I can be as high as I want to. This is great. So it was fun though. It was all right, but nothing too crazy. But with that being said, I do have some news. Do you want to, Patty, you want to hear the news?
I'd love to.
So, and Karac might know a little something about some of these. So the Nebraska Bigfoot Conference happened on over the weekend through the 24th of April. And one of the speakers there is a squatcher by the name of Dr. Igor Burtsev. He's Russian or some shit. And he gets on stage and he gets his friend on the phone. And his friend doesn't just get on the phone. They have a special friend that they're calling. And that special friend was allegedly Bigfoot.
Excuse me?
Okay, so apparently I'm the only one that's heard about this. Yes. And I will post, there's a video. Somebody, that was there for the panel took a video of this. Yeah, he gets on the phone with his friend. Apparently they have a Bigfoot. I think they said the Bigfoot's name was like Gertha or something like that. I can't remember if it was Gertha or not. It was something weird, but this other guy's Russian as well, and it's in Russia, and there's a Bigfoot there. And yeah, and they get this thing on the phone and making all kinds of weird, it kind of sounds like what's his name? The Tasmanian Devil.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. I think it's
the Tasmanian Devil.
Yeah, Taz. Yes, Taz. Yeah, the Tasmanian Devil from the Looney Tunes. Sounds like that kind of, just kind of weird and gross. And is it actually Bigfoot? I'm gonna say like I don't know, guys. I don't think.
I'm gonna take a wild guess. Go on a real limb here and say probably not.
We were talking about this. I do the I do the Clubhouse thing every week, and the first time that I had heard about it was because I do 5-minute cryptozoology news every Saturday with the Bigfoot Society, Jeremiah Byron over there, and that was the first time I had heard about it. And Jeremiah made a good point, and he was like, you know what? Because we were talking about how weird it sounded, and it just doesn't sound. I mean, it just sounds so ridiculous. The sounds are just sound ridiculous. It's obviously fake. And Jeremiah's like, well, no, think about it. Go back, 100 years ago, and have someone play the Sierra sounds, and they probably sound really fake, and sound really weird. He's like, keep an open mind. But I've done a little bit more digging. And this guy seems to be like a big, I don't know. I think he's made like a couple of videos, and he's just kind of more of a known hoaxer. I have no idea how he even got on this panel to begin with, from the sounds of it. So there you go. But everybody brought up a good point. Why didn't they just, well, that's what they said. They were like, which you can go to the Bigfoot Society podcast YouTube channel if you're not a Clubhouse member, and you can actually listen to the 5-minute cryptozoology news there. Jeremiah's really good about putting it on at least within the next 24 hours, and all the panels and stuff there if you're not on the Clubhouse app yet. But, everybody was saying, well, why didn't they just, FaceTime with Bigfoot? I mean, we can do that now, right? I mean, it's 2021. Why wouldn't you put him on camera? And I was like, well, we know why, implying that, obviously then the jig is up. And and somebody else brought up, oh, that's because Bigfoot's always blurry and you couldn't see him anyway. Like, oh, wow.
Fair point. Fair point.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So that happened. Pat, any thoughts on the Bigfoot call?
Nope.
Okay. Fair enough. The next item, which I think is even more interesting, is this. I'm excited about this one. So there is this village in Bolivia. Okay. And recently, the residents there are saying that a UFO came there, and they have pictures and video and whatnot of it. I guess, no, it's kind of hard to tell because all the news articles are not English, so I haven't translated them all yet to really piece it together. I just found out about this today. Apparently a UFO came and landed, and what came out of the UFO was a chupacabra. Looked like a chupacabra.
That's interesting because a lot of the Puerto Rican chupacabra reports ended up coinciding with like strange lights in the sky.
Well, there was like I believe, I'm not too keen on the chupacabra stuff, but I believe there was an alleged crash there, right? Where the sighting started. I thought maybe there was a some type of UFO crash, and then people started seeing the chupacabra. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know about that one specifically. I'll have to look that up later.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've heard that somewhere. Again, I'm not too. That's not my wheelhouse so much, but it just definitely got me interested with the story. So they say a chupacabra came out, and this thing like stayed. It seemed to have stayed for a couple of days, and like the UFO like stayed for a couple of days. And I think, or maybe it left and it came back. I can't really tell yet. But this thing kind of terrorized the town for a while. It was really mean, and then like the UFO took it back and left, and like on the ground where it had landed and where it was, there's like these big circles burnt into the ground. And apparently a ufologist over there in Bolivia is trying to get somebody to investigate this, because again, there's the entire village is talking about it. Like, this wasn't just like it was one or two people that might have like made up a story. Everybody saw it. Everybody has drawn it. They have videos, they have pictures. I don't think they actually have video pictures of the creature, but like definitely of the UFO, and nobody will investigate it. And it's weird. Like the military is like, no, the police are like, no, it's just mass hysteria. That's what they say. It's just mass hysteria, but it's the entire village.
Well, yeah, there's photos as well. That's so rare in these UFO landings cases, because the biggest question is like, why didn't anyone take a picture?
Right.
And here people took pictures, so that's interesting.
People did, and now granted, I don't know I don't know what the economy is like specifically in Bolivia. I know it's Puerto Rican, so I mean it could be hit or miss. But the people that did have phones, obviously, like, they've got pictures, they got video, they've got all this stuff. They got videos of like where it landed, and it's like flashing lights like into the sky from the craft itself. I mean, it's crazy, and nobody's looking into this really. And it's, and again, when I found this out, the only sources you have for it are all these like really weird, like fringe, like websites and things like that. Like there's no big media reporting. And they're all kind of, they're all Puerto Rican publications. So locally, it's a big thing. It just really hasn't gotten out there yet. So I don't know if I'm, breaking a story right now in America, but
it is interesting.
It is. And I'm excited to read through it a little bit more. Again, I need to go back and kind of piece it together better. I saw it and I was like, oh my God, I have to talk about this on the show. So I just kind of quickly put it together. So that will probably have some updates, but that's basically what they're describing is like a chupa. They said it was about, it wasn't very big. I think it was only like 12 inches tall. It's tiny. And maybe I'm wrong about that. It could have been upwards to 30 inches. I don't remember exactly, but it was still very small.
30 centimeters, but
30 centimeters.
I'm a little off on my conversion right now, so I can't.
I don't know.
If it's, because if it's 30 centimeters, that's a third of a meter, so it's about a foot. Yeah. You're probably not too far off.
Yeah, about a foot. Right. So about a foot tall. And are you reading about it right now?
Yeah, I Googled it.
It's okay. What do you think, Pat? What do you think about it?
I guess I always, whenever there's like these outlier sightings that kind of go against the conventional narrative of like grays or something like that, it's always a little bit. Now, I understand what you're saying about chupacabra. They've been associated with UFOs and sightings and stuff in the past. But, anytime you get like this like report of like, there was a group of kids playing in a field and they said a UFO landed, a big robot came out and it was shooting sparks out of its head and then it went back in or something. It's like, well, I've never heard, is this the one spaceship floating around with fucking robots, right? Is this the one spaceship floating around with foot tall chupacabras? Because that's not like the consistent narrative. Like there's so much that we don't know about this that you just kind of have to like collect the stories that kind of repeat themselves and use that as your basis. And then whenever these fringe stories pop up, which I understand it's creditable, and I understand there's a decent amount of evidence, so I'm not saying I think it's bullshit, but it always, to me, I'm always like, oh, I don't want to hear this because it muddles the narrative. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now what? Oh my God, now they're fucking 1 foot tall chupacabra things.
It kind of messes with what you are already comfortable with. You've already spent this time accepting the grays that Anything else is kind of
now it's like, where have these guys been this whole time? You know what I mean? And like, if they're flying around in the same spaceship, does that mean every time that there's a spaceship sighting that these are what's fucking inside of them? Or is there like 7 different species in the spaceship and they all take turns coming out? Or is like it gets harder and harder to wrap your head around?
Well, there's a theory that the Greys are they are like lab grown and lab created by different species of aliens, and they're here specifically. They're like worker bees.
Well, that's what I have in my dinosaur erotica. They're kind of like avatars.
Yeah,
like they're not actually the consciousness that's controlling those things is not in them. They're somewhere else, and they use these things for long distance journeys and missions and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's kind of it's not a crazy popular theory or anything, but it's definitely growing. And so that could be the case that maybe this one decide, or maybe there's a thought that possibly cryptids themselves could be worker bees for extraterrestrials. I think that's a little far fetched, but hey, maybe in the case of a chupacabra, I don't know. They're relatively new. They do date back, but like as far as like popularity goes and sightings, they're a pretty new concept. I think they really only got popular like what, in the 90s or so?
30 to 50 years probably, yeah.
Yeah. And so, it's not really so it could be technology. Who knows? But apparently the thing was mean as fuck and nobody wanted to go near it. So if there isn't a picture, I could see why. You got this little, foot tall, reptilian like creature that you saw pop out of a spaceship that wants to, come after you. I'm not going to go near it. That's not. So I don't know, but very interesting. Karac, do you have any thoughts on?
I was just thinking, I wonder sometimes, I wonder a lot whenever this comes up, why this supposedly happens in like super specific locations. Because I was just thinking, like, I've never heard a UFO report out of like Nepal.
That's true. That's true.
And
that's good.
I find that kind of thing strange, I guess, because like this is Puerto Rico, and this is the one sighting where the occupant, let's say, looks like a chupacabra.
Right.
Like, is that really coincidence, or is that like whether it's part of a narrative or part of some kind of actual consistent thing? That is so freaking weird to me, because there's areas where this stuff just does not happen.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good. Well, then call into question different, like portals being open in different areas and things like that. Maybe whatever species that is, that's the portal they can enter through is right above Puerto Rico. I guess I don't know. That's the only thing you can figure, right?
It was in Bolivia.
Bolivia's in Puerto Rico, isn't it?
I'm checking right now.
I'm almost.
I think it's at least near Puerto Rico. I'm not sure if it's part of the island or if it's like an offshoot of the island.
I'm just a 40 investigator, guys. I'm not a geographer. I don't really. I'm not good at the maps and stuff. I can break down physics like a motherfucker, but I am not good at the maps and stuff.
Let me see. Okay, no, it is actually in South America.
Yeah, in South America. I feel like there's a decent amount of South American sightings.
Yeah, they're definitely.
As far as spaceships go.
The origin.
But as far as like saying like Nepal, like I don't hear much coming out of Nepal at all.
Yeah, what's going on over in Nepal, guys? You guys okay over there?
I think that's what the internet was supposed to be, was supposed to give a microphone to all these people in all these different places.
But now there's too many microphones.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that, not to get too far distracted, but whenever I'm going through YouTube and like looking up like what was it, the Duende or the house elves or
the Duende? Yeah.
There's tons of videos on YouTube with that are all from Spanish speaking countries and stuff. So I think the stuff gets out there. It's just they have shitty cell phones and the quality is not great. They're not rocking the iPhone 11s or anything.
Yeah, there is a lot of stuff that comes out of South America, though. A lot of those really weird videos that you find on YouTube. It's like, well, where was this? And everybody's like, oh, it was Brazil. Like, and you're just like,
it's always freaking Brazil too.
It's always
But it's got the population center. It's got the bodies, right? And then it's also got the technology and the modernization to where the people have access to this stuff and the knowledge and foresight to put it online.
Yeah, that's true. It's just kind of has like, it's just that area that has like one foot in the door. And then of course, South America's got, the Amazon and so, obviously they got a lot they got a lot of culture there. They really do. They got like the huge extreme ends of the spectrum, but they've got a good mix of cities and land, in general. So I don't know why weird things happen there, but they do a lot actually. And you can't talk to anybody about it that's from there because it's just almost impossible to do. So it's
right.
No, you can't really question, you know what I mean? You can't really interview the witnesses. You can't really, get involved unless you're willing to go unless you're willing to go there and do it. I mean, you really can't. You don't have a choice. So, but I think it's really interesting. I'm excited to see what comes out of this. I can't believe that nobody's talking about it. I'm very shocked that this has been, but I guess, that's how UFO disclosure started. Now people are starting to talk about it more. And in the beginning, I was like, why doesn't everybody know about this? Like, why didn't this go viral on the internet? How come it took you guys months to catch up? What the fuck's going on? It was
right. The article I saw was dated May 1st. So maybe in a week it'll kind of pop a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm hoping. I'm hoping it will.
Well, once everyone listens to our show and hears us talking about it, I'm sure it'll be all over the fucking
everybody will know, right? Exactly. So you guys, do your research, get on there. You guys are my worker bees. Let me know what you find. Because I'm tired. So but yeah, I think that's all the news I really got for the week. Pat, you got anything else before I tell people about Karac and what he does and why he's
let's get to the guest. I'm excited.
Let's get to the meat. So Karac, you are located. Where are you located?
I'm in New Hampshire.
That's what I thought. Yeah, you're up there in the tiny states, that little tiny state cluster. How fun! And you do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and just explain to people who you are and what you do? And
sure, yeah. It's kind of I don't really know what to call myself. I guess I would say I'm an amateur cryptozoologist because I don't like necessarily taking the title cryptozoologist.
Sure.
I'm not even out of university yet. Let's calm down here.
Sure.
So yeah, I guess I'm an investigator or a researcher is what I would call myself. And recently I've become more of a filmmaker as well. So that's been interesting.
Yeah. I've seen that actually. Yes, I've been watching that. I've heard some things as well. I won't get into that yet though, but go ahead. Continue.
Well, thank you. And that's been crazy for anyone out there who's like looking to start a series of productions for like documentaries or something. Do not pile more than like 2 things on at the same time.
Yes.
Because I have like 6 things running right now and I really can't wait until it's done. It's too much for one person. But I've been doing a lot of that lately, which has gotten me out into actually doing field work more often.
Yeah.
Which has been so enjoyable because it's like at some point, I think a person risks not understanding the subject as well if they don't actually go out to locations. And
yes.
I would say that because it's like everything becomes hypothetical after a while. And clarification is like so important where it can happen. So that's been really cool and eye-opening, especially.
Well, and that's what I tell a lot of people. There's definitely a big difference between your researchers and your investigators, right? Because you're, which they're both very important. And then it becomes all the harder to be because, when you're just in the researching stage, and I think we all kind of start off as researchers, right? How did you get into this to begin with? What got you interested in cryptids and the world of the weird?
Right. Well, that was way back when I was probably 8 years old, I think I was. And I had this experience that fits the bill for what you'd call a Bigfoot sighting. And I had a few weird things happen after that. Never anything that was like beyond the scope of cryptozoology, I would say up until maybe, oh my God, what year was that? 2018 or 2019, I think early 2019. And that was when I helped someone film a documentary called Pine State Phantoms. And there were some weird experiences that we had there. But the whole sighting thing that I experienced is like, I don't think one can avoid it after that kind of experience.
Now, I'm gonna pause you for just a second,
Sure.
Because I had no idea that you've had encounters, so this is news to me. But that's my fault for not doing my research better. So tell us about that. You said you had this Bigfoot encounter. When was that? How did that go? Let's hear it.
Well, I grew up in this little southern New Hampshire town, and I'm talking like less than 1,000 people live there. You could get lost in the woods out there so easily.
Yeah.
And this must have been in, I keep saying third grade, but it might have been fourth grade. It's kind of hard to tell. It's been over 10 years since then either way. And I had accidentally locked myself out of the house this one morning. We had this super long driveway. So, like my neighbors on the property were like kind of a ways up. And I knew that there was this log that sat under this big, foliage cover. And it was going to rain. So I was like, well, I guess I'll, sit here for like half an hour and wait till, my parents realize I'm not in the house, and then they'll probably open the door. So I sat there and I heard something off behind me, and it just sounded like rustling, and I was hoping to, see a particularly cool squirrel or something, whatever a kid hopes to see. And I turned around, and probably about 100 to 200, I would say, feet from me was this big, bulky, human-shaped black figure. And it was so dark that I couldn't really see any definition on it. It was just this big black thing. But there's this one detail that I remember, that I think I remember, that's so interesting, because I keep thinking that I saw a pair of very blue eyes on it.
Okay.
But when I think of my actual recollection of my sight, I'm like, I didn't see that. So I don't know if I like tried to impose a face on this thing.
Okay.
Because obviously from that distance, if you have, let's say, a hair covered face, it just looks like no face.
Right.
And I don't know if it was whatever it was, if it was looking at me, but I got the impression that it was, because both me and this thing were very still for about 10 seconds. It turned to its left and walked off. And two things I found that were so interesting about that since then. When it was facing me, or what I think was facing me, it looked like the Provo Canyon Bigfoot footage, that kind of like very stocky frame, big shoulders and very small head. But when it turned to its left and walked away and I got to see the back, it looked like frickin' Patty. Like it was that sloping trapezius muscles, exactly where, the crest of the head is, the build of the shoulders. It looked almost exactly like that, but like more robust, I would say.
Wow.
Yeah. And that scared the shit out of me when I was a kid. So I ran to the house and knocked after that. But I kind of gathered the courage to go up there a few days later, and I had measuring tape with me. And in that area, there's not a whole lot of birch trees. So when you see a birch tree, you remember where it is, sort of thing.
Sure.
And it happened to be standing behind this snapped in half birch tree. And so I went over there and measured with a tape measure up to approximately where the head was. And it was roughly 7.5 feet off the ground.
Wow.
So whatever it was very tall. And I mean, that was one of, what is it? I think 3 experiences. Yeah, 3 experiences.
Wow.
A couple of years later, because me and my friends got super into this after this happened. And we had a brick thrown at us from the woods. There was like this steep incline that we were just throwing rocks off of, because, we're kids, we like throwing rocks. And I saw this brick and I was like, oh, how cool would it be if I threw the brick all the way down? And it was about like 100-foot drop. It was not very steep though. So it was kind of like one of those slow inclines. Boulders pretty much all the way down until you get to this very flat forest at the bottom. Threw it down and kind of tumbled down. We got bored and we turned around to go back to the house. And maybe about 2 or 3 steps after we walked away, we hear this bang. And we look, and the brick's been thrown back up, and it's cracked in half on one of the rocks.
Wow.
Yeah, okay. And that's interesting to me, because I have never met a single person who could do that.
Well, yeah, that's pretty intense. I mean, I guess maybe if it hit, if it hit in the exact precise way, then it could. But it's not impossible, but it's improbable.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the throw that gets me, because I think about it and it's like bricks are, considerably heavy. So
they are.
If it was a person, it would have had to have been pretty close. And that isn't a particularly thick area. And the brick went like between halfway to all the way down to the forest. So someone was either halfway down or all the way down and had a good enough wind up to throw the brick 50 feet back up.
Wow.
Which is pretty, incredible. And the third experience I had, and I haven't mentioned this one, I don't think yet, actually, on air for anything.
Ooh, this is exclusive, guys. Listen up.
Yeah, well, this was more recent. This was interesting because a lot of the stuff that happened, those 2 things, were when I was super young. And this was halfway through high school when this happened, and I'm a little bit over halfway through college right now. And that was kind of weird. I was hanging out laundry outside, and I heard a whistle. And I'd lived here for over 10 years at that point, and I'd never heard a whistle like this. It sounded just like a person whistling. It didn't sound like a bird. And so I whistled, and whatever it was whistled back. And we went like that for about 15 minutes. And it probably would have kept going because I stopped whistling because I had better things to do at that moment.
Sure.
So that was the last thing that happened. And that was basically just a few months before we had moved out, actually. So I've been in the area, the town over, I should say, since then, and didn't have extremely weird experiences. We were, me and a former partner, research partner, were filming for this kind of shorter documentary that we were going to do. And we found this tree that had been, it looked like essentially this taller tree, pretty thick, had been broken in half. It was about 15 feet tall, where the break was, and it was upside down and leaned against another tree. And what was weird about that was we looked around, and we're in like a thick forest, so there's no way it was construction equipment. Mm-hmm. And there were no trees that had been snapped in half.
Yeah, that is pretty telling.
Yeah, well, that means that something or someone carried it to that location.
Yeah, right. And we know people can't do that.
Well, even if, for one thing, I wasn't convinced that someone could either. And even if someone did, it's like, what was the point?
Well, yeah, that's true. Just to get your exercise in, I guess. I
suppose so. Maybe someone's practicing for Highland Games out there. I don't know.
It could be.
Those are essentially the scopes of my experiences. I had one thing happen this past November that prompted me into making a documentary, actually.
Okay.
And that was a wood knocking experience. And that was, I think, the clearest thing that has ever happened since either my sighting or since the rock throwing, the brick throwing, I should say. Because, and it's so funny because it's one of those moments where I remember I had this documentary on DVD called Bigfoot Lives. It's an older Bigfoot documentary. And it has some really interesting interviews in it. And this one person who's talking about this research area he has talks about how at one point in the forest he heard what he could only describe as the sound of a monkey. And he shot his audio recorder straight up in the air, turned it on, and that was when the sound decided to end. And it didn't happen again. And I was up in western New Hampshire and in an area where there's been, one or two reports. Uh-huh. And I was essentially just kind of listening. I had played some chimpanzee vocalizations about a half an hour beforehand and was just listening. And off in the distance, I hear the crispest, clearest, I can't imagine anything it would have been except very strong wood hitting equally strong wood, that really kind of solid ringing sound. And I was so concerned because when I turned on my phone to record the audio, for about 10 seconds, nothing happened. And I thought that I had missed my chance. And then it continued, and it went on for about 5 minutes. And I have all of it on audio.
That's amazing. You don't have that posted anywhere yet, do you?
I do, actually. I do on my YouTube channel.
Oh, well, we will definitely share that
thank you.
The description. So that would be, so you guys can definitely listen to that because that is, and I'm assuming it was rhythmic. It was in some type of pattern. It wasn't accidental.
It didn't sound accidental. The only sound that I could possibly compare to was someone stacking wood by throwing a log into the stack. But it happened, it's weird because it was rhythmic in some areas and not in others. There wasn't a consistent sound pattern, which you would think might mean stacking wood, but I realized listening to it, it happens too fast in some areas for that. It could only be somebody whacking something because the arm can move that fast, but having to heave up a log and throw it takes a bit more time.
Sure.
There's just some areas where, there's time in between and somewhere it's like knock, knock, knock. So it's like, okay, that's not someone stacking wood.
Wow.
So
great.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah, we'll definitely share that with people. That is pretty neat. Now, one thing that is hard to kind of explain, and I kind of hear it in your voice when you tell the story, but that's just because I know, is that you can't really define to people how you feel when these things are happening. Like you were kind of talking about, the first encounter and how you feel like you guys were looking at each other.
Yeah.
Right. But you can't really explain that feeling so much aside from just that? It's not something that you like visually saw happen. It's something that you felt happen.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly what the explanation is for why I felt it happen. Logically speaking, I guess you'd say, well, it was standing still and you were standing still. Chances are you were looking at each other. But not seeing a face from that distance made that difficult too. So I don't know what the feeling was. I know that if I was to compare it to anything, it would be like if you looked outside your window and you saw someone across the street just staring at you, except it was less scary than that. Because it was a thing that felt somewhere in between what it feels like when a person's looking at you and when a big animal's looking at you.
Yeah.
You don't feel as threatened as if it's a person, but you're still kind of like, this is a really weird experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that is, that I have a weird experience about staring at people. I won't share it today. It's a funny story, but it can get awkward. It does feel weird sometimes, but definitely not as weird as, say, if you were, staring down a cougar. That's a different feeling. But so, going back to your first encounter, did you know at the time, did you know about Sasquatch? Did you know what this was? Did you have any idea what it might have been? Or did you have to kind of do some digging to find out?
I think I was just getting into being kind of familiar with it. Beforehand, I had just watched like Scooby-Doo and stuff like that. And I forget exactly how I got into Sasquatch, but I was into it.
Okay.
Maybe, about half a year into it, but into it. And, it's actually kind of interesting because I remember the day beforehand, and I don't think this was legitimate, but it is so funny that it happened the day before my encounter. I found this right on the edge of my driveway, this little kind of ruffle in the leaves. We have so much leaf litter out there. It's crazy. So when there's a ruffle, you kind of notice it because it's if it's to the soil, it's like different from everything else around it on the ground.
Sure.
And it was kind of shaped like a gorilla foot, I guess. It looked kind of like a hand, but it was like a weird looking hand.
Okay.
Super small. Didn't actually look like it actually imprinted into the ground. It was just moved in that shape through the leaves. And there was a little sapling next to it that was like curved over. And at the time, me just getting into Bigfoot, I was kind of like, oh, I wonder if like something smaller walked by and like tripped, dug its foot into the ground and held onto the sapling for support. And that's why the sapling's bent. And that's why the foot is like into the soil. I don't think it was connected just because it doesn't really fit the bill for that kind of thing.
Sure.
And I mean, being young, being that young, I should say, you're like, well, everything's
magical.
Everything's magical and exciting. Yeah. But I do find it funny that happened the day before I had the sighting. That is still kind of interesting to me. I don't think I'd put any stock in it, but it's, a footnote in my head.
I mean, the fact that you remember it all, I don't remember half the shit from my childhood. So, I mean, you'd much rather have the information than not, you know what I mean? And instead of, now if you do need it, I mean, you've got it cataloged and it's there. And if you, for some reason, come across something similar in the future, then you can kind of test that theory. So,
yeah. And, the whole, cataloging info, I find that I do that with my experiences in the field more than I do, I think, anything else, which is probably not healthy, but, I do it anyway. That was one thing I did in 2017, I think, was I basically decided that I was going to spend the whole year, whenever I decided to think about my encounter, to try to figure out if it could have been anything else that was normal. And of course, the first thing you have to think of is, okay, person or black bear? Well, it's 7.5 feet tall, so it's not a person. So is it a black bear? And most of the stuff that I thought of, could have been a black bear, maybe on its hind legs or something, because they can do that. But the one thing that hit me was I saw its knees come up and come down when it walked away.
So it was definitely it was a bipedal by nature.
Well, it's something that is meant to walk on two legs. That means, and it's like, I don't know how to explain that.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Okay. So that is definitely a significant part of my life that I tend to remember super clearly.
And it is, when you're doing this kind of research, which I try to explain to everybody, of course, when we get into the stuff, like we want to believe that there's a big plesiosaur in the lock. We want to believe that, in my expert opinion, I think we've already proven Bigfoot's real. But we want to believe in these things. I want to believe that there's a giant half moth, half man flying around. You do want to believe in all the magic and wonder, because that's kind of, the excitement got you into it in the first place. However, in order to do your job correctly and honestly, you do have to have a very healthy dose of skepticism. And a big, and I say it over and over again, a big part of the job is deducing what these things are not before you can land on, oh, well, it was obviously, a Sasquatch, or it was obviously a Thunderbird, or whatever it is you're investigating at the time. Especially when you get these sightings in. So that is a very important key role. And I think it's, sometimes I think it's missed, especially with the age of the internet. We see all these stories. I'm not sure. Well, I have an inkling that you might know a little bit about this LBL witness. And
yeah, it's so cool you bring that up, so we can talk about that in a second, but go on.
So, and yeah, we'll get into it. We'll kind of give a little backstory, because I don't think everybody knows about this, but it has been something I've been heavily into lately. But you get stuff like that where, you got this guy coming out saying that he was witness to this dogman attack, and you got so many people that are willing to put him on their platforms. And this is just as an example, that are willing to believe the guy without really looking much into it, right? Everybody just kind of accepts that there's no evidence. Everybody just kind of, accepts that there's really no leg to stand on. And I can go on one of these shows any day and say, hey, I was there too. And nobody's going to say, no, you weren't, because there was nobody there. Everybody that was there was dead, and there's no proof of even people dying. And so it's, really interesting, how willing a lot of people are to just take things at face value and not really dig into it and just make sure that it's not, because I do think a good chunk of sightings of high strangeness in general are not a huge chunk. I would say about a good 10% of sightings are misidentification. It does happen. When we had, we had talked to Tobias Whalen. I know you've spoken with him as well, but we had him on the show kind of recently. He talked about that with the Lake Michigan sightings, that, he thinks that a lot of them are probably, he said probably about 40% were misidentification. It happens, and that is a reality in this field. But we'll go ahead. We'll talk about the LBL situation. So I'll kind of explain, because I don't know if Pat knows what this is, but Pat, are you there? Are you still listening?
Yes, of course.
Okay, wonderful. So have I talked to you about the land between the lakes thing, the dogman situation?
No, fill me in.
Wonderful. It's really very easy. So the land between the lakes is right now it's a national park, and it is it connects Kentucky and Tennessee in this little area, and it is a hot spot for a lot of high strangeness. Okay, people see stuff a lot there. Weird things happen a lot, which we get usually. We see these isolated areas of high strangeness. Well, one of the big stories that you'll hear from there is that in the 1980s, an entire family there was slaughtered by a creature. Now, there's some debate. Initially, it says that these people were slaughtered by a Sasquatch, but then it eventually has turned into a dogman. In the past, probably couple of weeks, this man has come forward and said that he was there. He was with the family he knew the family that was slaughtered, and he witnessed it, and he's now been sharing his story everywhere. The thing about LBL is that, in the LBL massacre, is that there's no proof of this. There's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that there was even a family murdered here. So, and of course, people say that the reason for that is because it was covered up by the government. So that's kind of, where we are right now, with the saga of LBL. But Karac, what do you have to say about that?
Right. Well, I had to get more into it recently. I'd heard about it beforehand, and I've been in more into it because, I've already said this on the podcast, but there's nothing like out for it just yet. But, me, Eli Watson, who is, the co-host of Cryptic Campfire, and Ryan Tremblay are working on this web series called The Man-Wolf Files. Yep. And essentially it's like an examination/analysis series on pieces of alleged dogman evidence. And this is one of our episodes. It's called The LBL Artist because of the sketch that he put out recently. And so we kind of had to dive more into LBL. And it's interesting because it is one of those places where, so far at least, there is no concrete evidence that's been publicized that this actually happened.
Right.
One of us is trying to track down to see if there's any police paper trails, for either a missing persons incident or some kind of homicide report. I don't know that we found anything yet because that isn't my area of study with it just now.
Sure.
I know that Eli Watson dug up another story from LBL that kind of fits the bill for Dogman more. And if I had to guess whether or not the story is true, I'd probably say that this is why people put Dogman onto the alleged killings. This is supposedly from around the same time period, and students from this nearby college were camping out there, and supposedly they claimed that they were hearing these wolf howls that sounded like different from how wolves usually sound. It was almost like there was a very what would you say? Oh, I don't remember the word exactly. It's like a harsh sound.
Okay.
Something that sounded more like a scream than a howl necessarily.
Yeah. Don't say demonic though. People will run with that.
No, I won't say that. A scream is just a sound. A scream is just a sound. And they reported that there was, the sounds of this large animal around the camp. They were like, I don't know what's going on, but we're out of here. They get into the car, and the driver allegedly reported that in the rearview mirror, he could see this big black creature behind the car, and it was trying to run up to the back. And so they sped off. And as they looked at it in the rearview mirror, they could see that it had these kind of loosely canine features. So these kind of large pointed ears and things like that. Again, no knowing if this story is true necessarily, but I'd be willing to bet that it at least influenced the Dogman, we'll say the Dogman aspect of the LBL murder situation.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And that is a very interesting, I'm kind of probably where you're at with the LBL situation. Now I have actually covered, I've been going because I'm relatively close. I'm about 5 hours away, and we intend on going and doing an investigation.
Yes. LBL. Right.
And so, that's going to be happening. But before I go, I like to know, so I do as much as I can before I show up. And, we've kind of gone, we've been going year by year, and we've been looking at through the 80s, because I would like to find evidence of this family even existing. And I haven't found any, but I've only made it up through 82. However, like I tell you, we have combed over everything,
right?
Everything, every single document in the county we have gone over. And not just that, but surrounding counties and news reports and, like you said, missing persons reports and things like that. Now, when we first started looking into this, I was speaking with Ryan Tremblay about, we were just kind of talking about it, and I just wanted to know how far away it was from me. Cause again, I'm in Ohio, this is Kentucky. It's not that far. And I Googled it. I remember we were talking, and it was around midnight my time. And so I pulled it up in Google Maps, and I can do it right now, and it'll show the same result. It's really strange. I pulled it up in Google Maps, and it tells you whenever you pull anything up in Google Maps, it gives you like this graphic, like this bar graph that tells you how busy it is based on the time. And where you are, your current time period, wherever it is you are, it will highlight in red. And it's like, this is yours. This is right now, right? This is real time. So it's like midnight. And like this bar graph, all of them are, kind of, you see the decline and the incline and the whatever, different times of the day, except for right there at that very moment at midnight, this bar graph is like to the top. It's at the tops, and it's full, and it's happening right now at the LBL at midnight. And, I thought it was strange. I was like, well, that's weird. How are these things reported? So my partner in crime, Anne, which everybody has heard me talk about enough, she's over one night, and I'm giving her the rundown on LBL, because Anne is my researcher. She will find it. If I need it, she will find it. She is damn good at her job. So I'm like, we need to find if there's any kind of paper trail in this whatsoever. And but she's asking, how far is it? Let me go look. She Googles it. Same result right there. It's happening, except it's not right now. And when Anne and I were talking about this, because I took the original screenshot while I was speaking with Ryan about it, sent it to him. And while Anne and I are talking about this, it's 1:30 in the morning. It's not midnight. However, midnight is highlighted, and it's like it's very busy. So, it's pretending that you're in that time. And like I said, you can do it almost any time of the day, and it will be, or at least over here it has been. And I've been kind of documenting at different times and seeing, if it changes, what happens. So then Anne looked into how those things are reported. Like, how do they know how busy an area is at any given time on Google Maps? You know?
Right.
Apparently it's based off of cell towers. And so if they're getting signals and they're pinging off of your phones, then that's how they know how busy a place is at any given time. That's where the reporting comes from. It's not like a statistical thing. So, our thought process is maybe something's happening there at, between, and I'm not saying anything crazy. I'm not saying that like the government comes and shuts the whole place down and they comb the area or anything like that. But maybe something, that we could even explain biologically, something in the air, we don't really know. So that's definitely something, we want to look into. LBL definitely has a lot of strange occurrences. Is there a dogman there? I could buy that there is. Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense. It's not a huge area, but it would be big enough. And, it would make sense for something like that to reside there. Plus, going back to the native, of course, there's Native American history here, like there always is in these cases. And, they speak about the dog man and whatnot. And, so it is interesting, but then you got people that muddy the waters, like I said, like this Roger character. And again, nobody can really tell him that nobody can say it didn't happen. Nobody can prove that this guy's lying because we don't even know that happened to begin with. Right. So,
right.
Have you heard his interviews, Karac? Do you know about, have you listened to him yet?
Ryan's been researching that for the episode, and I know a little bit about it.
Yeah.
And it is... I mean, it's like what you described, where it just seems kind of almost like a. I would say that I don't understand why he's been on so many interviews.
Yeah,
because it's a sensational story, but it seems like all it has going for it is sensation.
It's just a story, yeah. I mean, that's what I said earlier.
Yeah, and that's going to be the focus of one of our episodes, so that'll be really cool to do, I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's interesting. It's it's a hot topic right now. Everybody's talking about it, so it's a good thing to jump on it and kind of get into it, a little bit more. But that's kind of what I was saying. Was that at the end of the day, it's just a story. It's just, and we can catalog it, but what else can we do? I mean, we can't prove things wrong. And now he went on Paranormal Roundtable with Josh Turner on his recent stream, and he had him on with Jody Cook was also on there, who leads the North American Dogman Project.
Yes, right.
And Jody Cook does not believe his story. The North American Dogman Project does not endorse this story at all. They're not buying it. Just for different inconsistencies and different things that just don't make sense. And, but Roger made a really good point on that episode. And, because Jody was saying, listen, I've talked to law enforcement that was involved with this. I know these people that were involved with this. And Roger said, well, where are they? Let me talk to them. Why won't they come and call me out? He's got a point. Now, granted, I believe the reason why is because they're all dead now. Because again, this happened in the 80s.
Right.
So, it's just getting to be that time now. But then again, if everybody that could have possibly been a witness is now deceased, then again, we're back to square one. There's nobody that can prove the guy wrong. So,
yeah, that's a really interesting point. And I've thought a bit about that kind of thing. And the only thing that I can possibly think of, if this incident did happen, is that maybe it is literally only a paper report. Maybe this was never published online, directly. Maybe this never made it to headlines. And that sounds super crazy at first. But then I thought about this documentary / investigation that my friend Alexander Petikov did in New England for sightings of mountain lions in New England. And there is essentially pretty undeniable evidence that there are still mountain lions in New England.
Right.
There's hair evidence, there's DNA evidence, there's an entire carcass that was recovered by police officers, but it's always chalked up to, oh, well, it's a migration thing.
Sure.
But it's happened a ton of times. So it's kind of like as time goes on, you're like, this doesn't seem like migration anymore.
Right.
But here's an interesting thing. When you send that kind of DNA sample that you think is mountain lion DNA in New England to a lab in New England, they will tell you it's either not mountain lion, or they'll tell you they can't verify what it is. You send it to a lab outside of New England, and they'll tell you straight up that it is mountain lion DNA.
And that's strange.
It is strange. And the running theory that Alexander has suggested is, well, maybe it happens so little of the time that there is a concern for, the amount of safety precautions that would need to be come up with for the area. It could possibly affect how people use recreational national parks in the area and things like that.
Tourism and whatnot.
Yeah. And something like Dogman is way different than a mountain lion, obviously, but it's not necessarily a new phenomenon that people would keep a single incident of this happening under wraps for the sake of simplicity, let's say.
That's true.
And so I wonder if it ever was a thing that made it to newspapers, if it did happen.
That's true. Well, and we kind of have, Pat and I kind of have experience with talking about this. There was it's going to get kind of cryptic for a second, but right outside of my home one day while we're recording the podcast, there was a child hit by a vehicle outside of my apartment. Right. And there was police everywhere. Okay. It was a big deal. And, there was never any report on it. I have no idea what happened to this day. And it happened right outside my home. It was never in the news. I can't find anything about it.
Wow.
So, and things like that happen all the time. I mean, you would really be surprised how much is underreported because, it's just, they just pick out the best of the best and whatever's going to get the ratings and, whatnot. So, it could be really difficult to find. You're right. I mean, it might take going to the county and trying to see how far back they have records and combing over those records as written records and seeing what there is.
Right.
Which is definitely another idea. It's something that we're going to be doing with the TNT area in Point Pleasant, because we have missing time periods of history that we can't find. So it's possible you can do it. I mean, it's extra work, and at the end of the day, you might not find anything. Right. So is it worth it then? I guess at least you can make up your mind a little bit easier. But what if you do find it? I mean, then what? Then what?
Yeah, if you found it, that would be worth it. You'd think. I mean, imagine the moment that you're combing through files and suddenly.
There it is.
3 dead people found in LBL in the 80s. And you're like, oh my God, this is whatever happened. This is it. This is at least the thing it's based on.
Right. At least we know that something happened.
Yeah. Right.
So, it gets you closer to the truth every single time. Right. I mean, so that's kind of the point. Sometimes it's hit or miss in this world, but
absolutely.
I want to bring up another thing because you mentioned it. I want to talk about the puckwudgie.
Ooh, yes. Yeah. Man, where even to start with that? So
I'm so excited. Well, tell people what it is. We've never talked about the puckwudgie on the show, and I think Pat is going to get a lot of, because Pat is really like into the duende and stuff. I think he's really going to enjoy this puckwudgie thing.
I can't wait.
So it's a super similar phenomenon. Puckwudgie is a term that's found in Wampanoag and Algonquin terminology, and it essentially means small person who vanishes or small wild man who vanishes, and it denotes something in the mythology that's essentially a race of small, hairy people who in their mythologies are usually antagonizing. So like they kill one of the main giants in Wampanoag mythology, and afterwards the giants essentially pick them up and throw them all across North America, which is kind of interesting. So because all tribes have stories of little people. So the puckwudgie is often described as a very small, upwards only of about 3 feet, human-like being that is either covered in like furry hair or like is just a hairy-looking person.
Like a hairy little man.
Essentially, yeah. And the degree of hairy varies, but yeah. And it's usually described with a large nose and these very large ears at the sides of its head. And what's so interesting about the puckwudgie is that when you first get into it, there's a lot of paranormal esque puckwudgie reports.
Sure, folklore and
and then you have sightings with people who I've talked to who are like, I saw it transform into a ball of light, or there's been paranormal occurrences coinciding with puckwudgie sightings. And in most cases in cryptozoology, what you find is that it starts off as a biological thing when you first start looking into it. And the deeper down the rabbit hole you go, the weirder shit you find.
Sure.
The puckwudgie is the complete opposite. You start with all these weird paranormal reports. And the more you dig, the more you're like, people are like, roughly speaking, at least half of them are describing a small hunter-gatherer. Because you have people describing territorial behavior. Or you have people describing, I've talked to people who describe hunting methods that they've observed on a few occasions, separately. So not, on a few occasions, but, there was one person who said, I was looking out my window and I saw what I thought were 2 foxes, and one was kind of like hunched down and the other one was walking towards it. And as it walked towards it, it turned around and it was not a fox, but it had similar hair to a fox, and it pounced on the fox, grabbed it, and ran away with it.
Wow.
So yeah, there's one, and even like occasionally tool usage, things like rudimentary, maybe arrows or spears and things like that, which has been so interesting to investigate. And I'm filming a documentary on it right now called Wild Men of the Wampanoag, although it kind of covers a lot of little people's stories, including some duende sightings. And I think that what's been so interesting is that this is the first documentary I've done where, while filming it, we've had weird things happen. We visited this location site in New Hampshire, a team of my friends and I, and near the end of the night, we were up on one of the small hills in the area. And we've been up there tons of times during the day and tons of times during the night. This is in, I think, October or November, so it got dark pretty quickly. And on the last time that we were up there, you could just feel it in the air that something was totally wrong. And like dangerously so. And I don't know how else to describe that, but I remember asking them the next day, because we all kind of hightailed it down the hill to the car when we finished our business there, but didn't say anything. And I asked them the next day, the two people I was up there with, how they felt about it. And both of them said, I didn't feel safe. There was, and the best way that I think one of them said was it felt like, which is weird because we'd never felt this in this context before on that hill, but in that specific time, it felt as though we were not welcome.
And Pukwudgie they're kind of known for being like little assholes, right? I mean, they're violent.
Basically, a lot of Pukwudgie reports are, aggressive, let's say, or
right.
even paranormally hostile is another one that we get. I mean, there's a guy in Texas who, I think anonymously, was on Bigfoot World Radio, and he talked about this site in Texas, supposedly, where there's what appears sometimes to be multiple of these things. And he's allegedly seen some at like the corners of his property. They seem to be encroaching in a little bit too close for comfort. And it's something that he described as quite frightening. Now, of course, him being anonymous and it being a pretty fantastic story, who knows if that's true. But it certainly isn't alien to the world of Pukwudgies for that to be similar to what people talk about. So yeah, it's a really weird case. And it's so weird because of all the cases for us to have weird things happen on, this one, not a Bigfoot one, not Champ, one as weird as Pukwudgie.
And it's like, how intimidating can something that's not even 3 feet tall be? I mean, but until you see it. Well, so what's really interesting about it is that we have this, I have this good friend. She's been on the show now twice. I've been on her show a couple of times. Her name is V. She hosts the Life Paranormal with V podcast. And she, over on her show, on one of the episodes I was on, we dived into, she's a psychic medium. She's got all kinds of weird history, typical history of high strangeness in her life. However, she says that when she was a young child, she saw a little man in her home. And not just that, years later, later on down the line, her mom also told her about how she saw the same weird man in their home on a different occasion. So, and while she didn't feel like it was very hostile, she, since then, her whole family has dreamed about this thing. And in the dreams, it is aggressive. Now, do you think that these reports, because there's also in Fae folklore, there are brownies and they're just little house spirits, but they're little men, right? They're these little men. They look like, they're like garden gnomes. So it's kind of, the same idea. But brownies aren't hostile. They kind of, they're a little, I don't want to say they're mischievous. They're just clumsy. And, they try to help, but they're just not very good at it. So, sorry guys. But but they're not mean at all. Do you think that these are essentially the same thing as a Pukwudgie? Do you think that they're maybe the same family, but different species? What's your take on that?
It's so tough because it kind of depends on what you think any of this would be. I've talked to people who take the paranormal angle, and it's how do you classify that? So you would say that these things are similar maybe, but whether or not they were the same thing would be a different matter, I suppose. And aggressiveness would come down, I suppose, in that way too. Well, is it a good spirit or a bad spirit sort of situation? Right. The Wampanoag described them as aggressive and very hateful of people. So that's interesting. That's a big part of the story of the Pukwudgie in their mythology, actually. But if you think of it in the physical context, there's a person I talked to in the documentary who talks about, well, we have not a ton, but quite a few diminutive human ancestors that we know about.
We do.
Yeah, and the primary example people use is Homo floresiensis. But there's a few more that people don't talk about. One newer one is Homo luzon, and that's something that we could find out was diminutive. But one interesting thing is that its finger bones were still curved as they are in tree-dwelling primates. So we probably had diminutive human ancestors that were still human, but probably also spent half their time in trees. So that's fascinating. And then you have, in Japan and China, you have the red deer cave people in Manatagawa Man, who are basically all just Far East versions of Homo floresiensis. And of course, you have the Bering Land Briggs in the Far East. So, and is it then coincidence that things like Homo floresiensis are the most recent extinct human ancestors? So if you think of it in the physical context, well, maybe they're, hypothetically speaking, are still these diminutive human ancestors, and like a lot of animals in cultural mythology, get placed into a magical area. Talking eagles and things like that. Eagles are completely normal, everyday animals, but in mythology they talk and they have magic powers.
Sure.
So if you have something like a Pukwudgie, if you were to consider if it was real, it doesn't necessarily have to be a magical thing just because it's described that way in mythology.
Yeah, well, just kind of like the bring it up for briefly, like the Wendigo, I believe, never really existed. I believe that the Wendigo itself was just, and we kind of talked about it on the show. We talked about, we think that most cases it was just an easy explanation for, the cold winter months and, famine and, hypothermia and mental illness. But, there are the reports of people seeing something, and the things that they describe seeing actually end up fitting more the description of the pale crawlers.
Yes. Yeah. That's a really interesting case too.
That is right. Really... So it's like these two legends kind of came together and created a creature of its own that doesn't really exist to begin with, just because of, just primitive science and, just things like that. I mean, you come across something in the woods, you're going to have some type of explanation for it. You got to reason it away somehow. And at that time, magic was the way to do it. Right. I mean,
yeah, well, you have that in stories, and, we have stories like fables that are complete nonsense, talking animals and stuff, but they make sense because they teach us lessons. And I would even argue that something like the Wendigo is like, well, what's the process of the Wendigo? Well, you commit pretty much the worst crime you could possibly commit, and then you turn into a monster.
Right.
And it's like, that's a pretty good warning to not be a bad person.
Yeah, right. It's accountability.
Yeah. Don't betray others, or you'll turn into a monster and live in the woods.
Right.
Kids could believe that, kids could definitely believe that.
Absolutely. And if that's just what you hear your entire life, then you grow up to be the adult that believes it because you don't know any different. And you've seen these people turn into monsters sometimes. So,
yeah, exactly. It reminds me of this super funny story that my mom once told me, where whenever she would act up at home, her dad would say, "I'm going to call the local Native American chief and he's going to take you away and you're going to live with the Native Americans instead."
Oh my God.
And it was like she believed that, as nonsensical as it was. She believed that.
Yeah.
So,
well, Pat and I are both parents, so we know. Pat convinced his kid that he killed the siren head creature.
Me and his godfather, when we were Cub Scouts, we came across it in the woods and did battle with it and won.
Did battle with it.
Yeah. And they'll believe anything. I mean, they really will. Kids are dumb.
Well, that's the thing. We talked about, everything's exciting and magical to a kid because they haven't gotten to a stage where it's like, okay, I have to start deducing things, logically because there's patterns. You can convince a kid that in the middle of a completely populated, non-forested area, Native Americans would come to your door and say, okay, you're coming with us now, if you acted up one time. And, if you can get kids to believe that, you can definitely get kids, let's say in a survival situation like, North American winters tend to be, that if they lied or betrayed somebody close to them, that they were going to go live in the woods.
Yeah. Yeah, you could. I mean, it's really not that far-fetched to believe. I mean, especially, anybody listening that has kids, you guys know. I'm sure you've told your kids some really terrible stories because I know I have. So, nothing too damaging, but I mean, come on, think about it. I can't. I don't want to say it too loud because my kid is home, but Santa Claus is a great example of that.
Wonderful
example.
What I mean? Yeah.
The Tooth Fairy. I mean, those are all really good examples of things that, kids are definitely willing to believe. Now, it's just the issue is that, getting older and again, having that, not having the, the science and whatnot that we do now. I mean, back, way back when, of course, then you're going to just continue to use that logic. Nobody's ever taught you any different to not. So,
you even see it happen again with like, real things or things that could be real. So like Bigfoot, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tons of native stories about Bigfoot, and they're all generally taken pretty seriously. But you have that same aspect where like, the Pacific Northwest tribes told their kids, if you act up, Zonaqua, which means, I think it means basket woman, is going to come out of the woods. She's going to put you in her basket and take you away. But Zonaqua also essentially meant the female Sasquatch.
Okay.
So there you have a thing that could be real being put into a mythological context, probably for a good reason. And again, with real animals, don't act up or the coyote will come and take you.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, it is a good possibility. I think it's a really good explanation for some of these things and kind of, where we're at now. And, so it's like, it can't be hard because then you have, also, which everybody knows, again, I'm a big Keelian. So I believe there's a lot of science that we don't understand also, which would account for modern day sightings and their weird happenings of, that may seem paranormal. And things like that. I mean, I think there are explanations for these things. I just think that our science doesn't know how to explain it yet. Doesn't mean it won't. It's just that, it hasn't gotten there yet. I mean, we learn new things all the time about physics, and physics is all it is the way the world works. And so if we don't even understand the way the world works, I mean, how can we say that, paranormal happenings aren't legitimate? Because we really wouldn't know yet. So I don't know. I'm trying to think if I have anything else. Pat, do you have any questions? You've just been listening.
Just been taking notes.
That's okay. You got a lot going on now. That's fine. Well, I definitely don't want to keep you too long. I know we're getting on about an hour and a half here. Do you want to go ahead and, do your shameless plug and all that good stuff?
Sure. Well, definitely my main platform is the Crash Course Cryptozoology YouTube channel. I'm trying to get back into uploading consistently, although I wouldn't put money on it. But these things happen. I run a blog called the Sasquatch Print Project, which examines alleged Sasquatch handprints and dermal ridges. So that might be interesting for some people. We also have a Crash Course Cryptozoology Facebook page as well. And those are the three things that I would definitely say to check out because that's where most of the stuff happens.
That's great. Awesome. Wonderful. Well, we will definitely share all your links and whatnot again in the description here so everybody can go follow you if they don't already. I do recommend the Crash Course Cryptozoology page. Your channel is really good.
Oh, thank you.
There is plenty of things on there to keep you entertained while Karac takes his sweet time to upload. So, I'm just kidding. It's so hard to work for yourself. It really is. So I understand.
Well, it's that and having a podcast on the same channel. Sometimes you just want to edit a video, but you've been sitting on this recorded podcast for like 4 months and you're like, I have to do this first.
So well, and when you, and I know being a filmmaker, also doing this stuff, it's just adds a whole nother element to it. Because now you're the director and all these projects and all these people want your attention all the time, and it can be overwhelming. So it's
absolutely,
but the end results are always worth it. So I believe in you. I think you should continue doing what you're doing. You'll get there.
Well, thank you.
But I really appreciate having you on this week. Maybe you'll want to come back sometime and we can talk a little bit more about more streamlined topics instead of just kind of the salad, the cryptid salad, but it's always fun. So, but
yeah, well, it was a lot of fun being on the podcast. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure thing.
I guess that's it, guys. We will be back next week with more guests and more fun for Monster May. So we will see you back here next Wednesday.